"That man put something in your glass, sir." The voice came from below the edge of the table, barely louder than the clink of silverware around them. Graham Pendleton had been reaching for his bourbon. His fingers were 2 inches from the crystal when the words landed. He stopped. His hand hung in the air the way a hand hangs when the body has understood something the mind has not yet caught up to. He looked down. A girl was crouched beside his chair, half hidden by the white tablecloth that draped to the floor. She could not have been more than 8. Her hair was pulled back in 2 tight braids with small blue beads at the ends. She wore a plain gray t-shirt tucked into jeans that were clean but faded at the knees. There was a bus pass clipped to the belt loop of those jeans, which struck him as an odd detail to notice. But he noticed it. She was holding a plastic bin against her hip, the kind used to bus dishes, and it was almost too large for her to carry. Her eyes were brown and enormous, and locked onto his with an urgency that made his chest tighten before he understood why. "Please don't drink it," she whispered. "Please." The restaurant was called Marchetti's. It was the kind of place in downtown Charleston where a reservation required 3 weeks and a last name that someone recognized. The lighting was low and amber. The walls were dark wood. The waitstaff moved in black vests and white shirts with the quiet choreography of people who had been trained not to be noticed. Graham Pendleton had eaten here perhaps 200 times in the last decade. He had closed deals at this corner booth. He had celebrated anniversaries that no longer needed celebrating. He had, just 45 minutes earlier, signed the final papers on the sale of Pendleton Maritime to a European consortium for a number that would have made his father, a longshoreman from Savannah, who had died with $1,100 in a savings account, sit down on the nearest chair and not get up for a while. The man sitting across from him was Victor Slade. Victor had been his chief financial officer for 11 years. He had been the one to structure the deal. He had been the one to find the consortium. He had been the one who, when Graham had said he was tired and wanted out, had put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Let me handle it, Graham, you've earned the rest." Victor was now looking at the girl with the expression of a man who has found a stain on his shirt at a formal event. "Who is this?" Victor said. "Where's the manager?" Graham did not answer him. He was looking at the girl. She had not moved. Her knuckles on the plastic bin were pale. "What's your name?" Graham said quietly. "Josie. Josie, what did you see?" She glanced once at Victor, then back at Graham. Her voice dropped lower. "When you went to the bathroom, he took something out of his pocket. A little bottle, clear. He put it in your glass and swirled it with his finger. Then he wiped his finger on the napkin and put the bottle back in his jacket. The inside pocket, left side." Graham felt the room do something strange around him. The amber light seemed to sharpen. The murmur of other diners became a sound he was suddenly outside of, as if he had stepped behind glass. Victor laughed. It was a short, performative laugh, the kind designed to dismiss. "Graham, she's a kid. She's probably looking for a tip or playing a game. Kids do that." He looked at the girl. "Sweetheart, you need to go back to the kitchen, okay? We're having a private dinner." "I'm not lying," Josie said. She said it the way a child says something when she has been told before, about other things, that she is lying, and has learned that the sentence needs to come out fast and clean before the adults decide. "I saw it. I was clearing the table by the window and I saw it." Graham looked at his glass. The bourbon sat there, amber and still, catching a small point of light from the candle on the table. He had ordered it 20 minutes ago. He had taken one sip before excusing himself to the restroom. The glass was now perhaps a quarter-inch lower than when he had left it, which could mean nothing, or could mean someone had swirled it. He looked at Victor. Victor's face had arranged itself into concern. Professional concern. The kind of concern a man wears when he has practiced wearing it. "Graham, come on. You're not seriously." "Victor," Graham said, "take your jacket off." "What? Take your jacket off and put it on the table." "Graham, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to take your jacket off." The table went quiet, not just their table. The couple at the next booth had stopped mid-conversation. A waiter paused with a tray of water glasses. In the small universe of Marchetti's on a Thursday evening, something had shifted, and the people in the room could feel it the way animals feel a change in pressure before a storm. Victor did not take his jacket off. He smiled instead. It was a very good smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent 11 years making complicated numbers look simple and uncomfortable truths look manageable. "Okay," he said, standing. "I think we've had enough excitement for one night. I'm going to find the manager and have this sorted out. Clearly, the kitchen staff needs better supervision if children are wandering around bothering guests." He buttoned his jacket as he stood. Left side, inside pocket. Graham watched the hand brush the lapel, watched the small reflexive check that a man does when he wants to make sure something is still where he put it. "Sit down, Victor." Victor did not sit down. He took one step away from the table. Then another. He was moving toward the front of the restaurant with the measured pace of a man who is not running but is also not staying. Graham reached for his phone. He dialed 911. He did it calmly, the way a man dials who has spent 40 years making decisions that could not be unmade and has learned that calm is not the absence of fear but the management of it. This is Graham Pendleton. I'm at Marchetti's on King Street in Charleston. I have reason to believe someone has put a substance in my drink. The individual is leaving the restaurant now. He is wearing a dark blue suit. His name is Victor Slade. I need police here immediately. I also need someone to secure the glass on my table. Do not let anyone touch it. The dispatcher asked him to stay on the line. He did not stay on the line. He hung up and looked at Josie, who was still standing beside the table holding the bus bin, and who had not moved, and whose face had the expression of a child who has done the thing she came to do and is now waiting to find out whether the adults are going to make it mean something or make it disappear. Josie, Graham said, put the bin down. Sit in that chair. Don't touch the glass. Don't let anyone near this table. She set the bin on the floor. She climbed into Victor's empty chair. She sat with her back straight and her hands in her lap, the way a child sits when she is being careful about everything, because she has learned that being careful is how you survive rooms that were not built for you. Graham stood. His knees protested. He was 67 years old and his knees had been protesting for a decade. But tonight they protested louder. He walked to the front of the restaurant. Victor was gone. The hostess at the podium, a young woman in a black dress, was holding a menu against her chest and looking confused. The man who just left, Graham said. Blue suit. Yes, sir. He went out. He seemed to be in a hurry. Is everything? Lock the front door. Sir, I can't. Lock it now. The police are on their way. No one leaves until they get here. She locked the door. Her hands were shaking. Graham did not blame her. He went back to the table. Josie was sitting exactly where he had told her to sit. The glass of bourbon was untouched. A waiter was standing 3 feet away, looking uncertain. No one touches this table, Graham said to the waiter. Not the glass, not the napkin, nothing. Understood? Yes, sir. Graham sat down across from Josie. He looked at her. She looked at him. The candle between them flickered once. How old are you, Josie? 8. And you work here? I help out. After school and on Saturdays. Mr. Marchetti lets me bus tables for tips. He knows my grandma. Where is your grandma? At home. She had her chemo today, so she's resting. She doesn't know I came to work tonight. I told her I was going to my friend's house. Graham absorbed that sentence the way a person absorbs a punch they did not see coming. Chemo. Resting. Doesn't know. What's your grandmother's name? Mabel. Mabel Tate? And your parents? My dad's not around. My mom passed when I was 3. It's just me and Grandma. The first officers arrived in 6 minutes, 2 patrol cars. They came through the kitchen entrance because Graham had told the dispatcher about the locked front door. The first officer was a heavy-set man in his 40s who introduced himself as Sergeant Padilla. He had a calm face and a notebook that was already open. Mr. Pendleton? Yes, sir, we've got a unit looking for Mr. Slade. His vehicle is not in the parking garage. We've put out a description. The detective unit is on the way. Can you walk me through what happened? Graham told him. Then he pointed at Josie. She saw it. She's the witness. Sergeant Padilla crouched in front of Josie's chair. He did it slowly, the way a man does when he has children of his own, and knows that the distance between standing and crouching is the distance between authority and trust. Hey there, I'm Sergeant Padilla. You can call me Luis if you want. Can you tell me what you saw tonight? Josie told him. She told him in sentences that were short and exact, and that landed with a weight of details that only someone who had actually watched would know. The clear bottle, the left inside pocket, the finger swirling, the napkin wipe. She told him that Mr. Slade had checked his phone twice while Mr. Pendleton was in the bathroom, and that the second time he checked it, he nodded at the screen like he was reading something he expected to read. She told him that when Mr. Slade poured the liquid into the glass, his hand did not shake, and that this was the thing that scared her most, because her grandmother had taught her that a person whose hand does not shake when they are doing something wrong is a person who has done it before. Sergeant Padilla wrote without looking at his notebook. When Josie finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Josie, that's one of the best witness statements I've ever taken, and I've been doing this for 19 years. Josie did not smile. She looked at Graham. Is he going to come back? No, Sergeant Padilla said. He's not coming back. A woman in a charcoal blazer arrived at 8:47. She was not a police officer. She was Detective Anita Becerra, plainclothes, with a badge on a lanyard, and the kind of eyes that looked at a room and cataloged it, the way a librarian catalogs a shelf, everything in its place, everything accounted for. She spoke to Sergeant Padilla first. Then she came to the table. Mr. Pendleton, I'm Detective Becerra. The glass has been collected and is on its way to the lab. We'll have preliminary results within 2 hours. I'd like to speak with you privately." "She stays," Graham said, nodding at Josie. "Sir, she's a minor. We'll need to. She saved my life. She stays." Detective Becerra looked at Josie. Josie looked back at her with the particular steadiness of a child who has been through enough that she does not look away from adults who are deciding things about her. "All right," Becerra said. She pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat. "Mr. Pendleton, I'm going to be straight with you. Victor Slade's name came up in a federal financial crimes investigation 4 months ago. He's been under surveillance by the SEC in connection with unauthorized transfers, totaling approximately $9 million from Pendleton Maritime's offshore accounts. We were not involved in that investigation. We were informed of it 3 weeks ago when Charleston PD was asked to assist with local surveillance." Graham felt the room tilt slightly. 9 million. Offshore accounts. Victor had managed those accounts personally. Graham had let him because Victor had said 11 years ago, "I'll handle the complexity so you can focus on the ships, Graham." And Graham had been grateful because he did not like complexity and he did like ships. "The sale you finalized today," Becerra continued, "creates a mandatory audit window. Under the acquisition terms, every account gets reviewed by the consortium's forensic team starting Monday. Mr. Slade would have known that. He structured the deal." "He structured the deal," Graham repeated. The words came out flat. "Yes, sir. He built the timeline, and the timeline gave him until Monday. After Monday, the transfers would surface, which means tonight was not random." Graham looked at the bourbon glass, which was no longer on the table because it was now in an evidence bag somewhere in the back of a police van. But he looked at the spot where it had been. He had been about to drink it. His hand had been 2 inches away. He had been thinking about his father, about what the old man would have said about the sale price, about whether longshoremen in heaven get to be proud of their sons. And he had been reaching for the glass the way a man reaches for something familiar at the end of a long day. 2 inches. "How long until you find him?" Graham asked. "His car was spotted heading north on 26 about 15 minutes ago. Highway patrol is on it. He won't get far. His accounts are already frozen as of," she checked her watch, 40 minutes ago. "The SEC moved fast once we called. His accounts were frozen before you even got here." "The federal team was ready, Mr. Pendleton. They've been ready for weeks. They were waiting for a triggering event." Tonight was the triggering event. Graham leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked. He thought about Tuesday mornings, when Victor would come into his office with 2 coffees and a summary of the week's numbers. He thought about the trip to Scotland 3 years ago, when they had stood on a cliff above the North Sea and Victor had said, "You know, Graham, I never had a father who taught me anything. You taught me everything." He thought about the Christmas party last year, when Victor's wife had hugged Graham at the door and whispered, "Thank you for being so good to him." He thought about $9 million, and a clear liquid in a small bottle, and a hand that did not shake. "Mr. Pendleton," Detective Becerra said, "is there someone you can call? Someone not connected to the company?" "Caroline Marsh, my personal attorney. She handles my estate and my family trust. She has nothing to do with the business." "Call her." He called her from his own phone because Becerra said his phone was likely clean since the surveillance had been on Victor's devices. "Not his," Caroline answered on the first ring. She always answered on the first ring for Graham because 22 years ago he had been the only client who showed up to her office on the day her husband died and sat in her waiting room for 3 hours until she was ready to talk. Not about law, just to talk, and she had not forgotten. "Caroline, I'm at Marchetti's. Victor tried to poison me tonight." She was silent for 4 seconds. Then she said, "I'm leaving now. Don't sign anything. Don't say anything to the press. Is there a detective with you?" "Yes, put her on." He handed the phone to Becerra. They spoke for 2 minutes. Becerra handed the phone back. "She'll be here in 15. Josie had been listening to everything. She had not pretended not to. She was watching Graham with her eyebrows pulled slightly together, the way they pull when a child is trying to figure out whether an adult is going to be okay or whether being okay is something the adult is performing. "Are you sad?" she asked. The question hit him harder than the word poison had. "Yes," he said. "I'm sad. Because he was your friend? Because I thought he was." She nodded slowly, as if this distinction made sense to her, which it probably did, because children who grow up fast learn early the difference between a person who is your friend and a person who is in the shape of your friend. "My grandma says the worst lies are the ones that feel true the whole time they're happening," Josie said. Graham looked at this child sitting in a chair that was too tall for her, with her feet not reaching the floor, with bus beads in her hair and a bus pass on her belt loop, and a grandmother at home who was resting after chemo and did not know her granddaughter was here. and he felt something crack open in the center of his chest that had been sealed shut for a very long time. Your grandma sounds like a wise woman. She is. She's the smartest person I know. Caroline Marsh arrived in 12 minutes, not 15. She came through the kitchen entrance the way the police had, because the front door was still locked, and she was wearing the same thing she always wore, a white blouse and dark trousers and flat shoes that made no sound on the floor. She carried a leather bag over one shoulder, and her reading glasses were already on her face, which meant she had been reviewing something on her phone during the drive. She looked at Graham first, then at Josie, then at the empty chair where Victor had been sitting. She did not ask what happened because she already knew. She sat down in the chair Becerra had pulled over, set her bag on the floor, and said, "The auditors start tomorrow morning at 6. I called the consortium's legal team from the car. They're cooperating fully. Every account Victor touched in the last 36 months will be flagged by noon. Thank you. The SEC has a sealed indictment ready. They were planning to move next week. Tonight accelerated." Everything. She paused. "Graham, there's something else." "What?" The offshore accounts weren't just siphoning funds. Victor was rerouting insurance payouts. 3 vessels that were flagged for maintenance issues in the last 2 years, the Corbin, the Salter, and the Magnolia Bay, had their repair budgets diverted. The inspections were falsified. The Magnolia Bay is currently at sea with a crew of 26. Caroline's voice did not change when she said this, but her hand, the one resting on the table, pressed flat, the way a hand presses when a person is holding something down inside themselves. Graham said, "The Coast Guard has been notified. They're diverting a cutter to escort her to port. The crew is safe, but the ship needs a full inspection before it moves another mile." Graham closed his eyes. 26 people on a ship whose maintenance had been paid for on paper and stolen in practice. 26 people whose safety he had guaranteed with his name, his company, his reputation, and whose safety had been traded for $9 million by a man who brought him coffee on Tuesday mornings. "I want every crew member contacted personally," he said. "Not by the company. By me. I want their families told what happened. I want the repair costs covered out of my personal account, not the company's. And I want the Magnolia Bay renamed. I don't care what it's called. I don't want the crew going back to sea on a ship that carries the name of the voyage where their lives were traded for money." Caroline wrote it down without comment. Josie was watching him. She had not said anything for several minutes. Now she said very quietly, "Mr. Pendleton?" "Yes, Josie. I have to go home. My grandma's going to wake up and check on me at 10. If I'm not there, she'll worry, and worrying makes the sick worse." Graham looked at his watch. It was 9:22. He looked at Detective Becerra, who nodded. "We have what we need from her tonight. We'll follow up tomorrow if that's all right. I'll need a guardian present for any formal statement." "I'll take her home," Graham said. "Sir, I can have a patrol car. I'll take her home." Caroline drove. She did not ask for the address because Josie gave it before anyone asked, the way a child gives directions when she is used to navigating for herself. It was a neighborhood on the north side of the city, past the hospital, past the shuttered textile mill, past the Dollar General that served as the area's grocery store. The houses were small and set close together. Some had porches that were sagging. Josie's house had a porch with a rocking chair on it and a wind chime made of spoons that clinked softly in the night air. "That's it," Josie said. "The light in the front window means Grandma left the lamp on for me." Caroline pulled to the curb. Graham got out and opened the back door for Josie. She climbed out. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at him. Under the streetlight, the blue beads in her hair caught the light and held it. "Mr. Pendleton." "Yes, are you going to be okay?" He almost said yes automatically, the way adults say yes to children, about things that are not yet yes. But he did not. He said, "I think so, because of you." She considered this. Then she said, "Okay, good night." And she walked up the 3 steps to the porch, opened the screen door quietly, and slipped inside. The screen door closed behind her without a sound, which told Graham she had practiced closing it without a sound many times. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The wind chime made of spoons played a small tuneless song. "Graham," Caroline said from the car. "Get in. We have a long night ahead." He got in. They had a long night ahead. Victor Slade was arrested at 10:48 p.m. at a gas station outside Orangeburg. He had stopped to fill the tank of the car that was registered to the company, which Graham found almost funny. He was arrested without incident. In his left inside jacket pocket, officers found a small glass vial containing approximately 2 milliliters of a clear liquid that the lab would later identify as a concentrated cardiac glycoside, a substance that, in the quantity present, would have caused cardiac arrest within 90 minutes of ingestion and would have been very difficult to distinguish from a natural heart attack in a 67-year-old man with a documented history of mild arrhythmia. Victor had known about the arrhythmia. Victor had been the one who found the specialist. Victor had been the one who sat in the waiting room during the appointment and drove Graham home afterward and said, "You're going to be fine, old man. I'll make sure of it." The lab results were confirmed at 1:15 a.m. Detective Becerra called Graham personally. The substance is a plant-based toxin, highly concentrated. This was premeditated, Mr. Pendleton. The federal team is taking over the case as of now. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be in touch in the morning. Graham thanked her. He hung up. He was sitting in Caroline's office, which was above a bookshop on Broad Street, in a room with too many filing cabinets and a window that looked out on the steeple of St. Michael's Church. He had not eaten since lunch. He had not noticed until Caroline put a sandwich in front of him and said, "Eat," in the voice she used when she was not asking. He ate half the sandwich. He set it down. He looked at the steeple, which was lit from below and glowed white against the dark sky. Caroline, the girl. I know. Her grandmother has cancer. I know. You said chemo. She busses tables at Marchetti's after school. She's 8 years old. I heard. I want to help them. Caroline took her glasses off and set them on the desk. She rubbed the bridge of her nose the way she did when she was about to say something that required the glasses to be off. Graham, I need to tell you something before you go down that road, and I need you to hear me. I'm listening. Do you remember the Tate family? He searched the name. It did not land. 4 years ago. The Maritime Workers Relief Fund that you set up after Hurricane Elmore. One of the disbursements went to a family on the north side. Single mother, 1 daughter. The mother was 26. She had worked at the port part-time. She got sick, cervical cancer. The fund covered her treatment for 7 months. When she died, you personally covered the funeral costs. You did it anonymously. You told me to make sure no one connected it to your name because you didn't want it to become a press opportunity. The mother's name was Angela Tate. Graham went very still. Angela Tate had a daughter. The daughter was 3 when her mother died. The daughter went to live with her maternal grandmother, whose name is Mabel Tate. The daughter's name is Josephine. She goes by Josie. The room was very quiet. The steeple of St. Michael's glowed in the window. A car passed on Broad Street. Somewhere in the building, a pipe made a small ticking sound as the heat shifted. She doesn't know, Graham said. No, she doesn't know. Mabel might. I sent the funeral arrangement letters under the fund's name, not yours, but I included a handwritten note. It said, "Your daughter mattered. Your granddaughter will, too. Mabel Tate is a sharp woman. She may have asked questions. She may not have. But the note was in my handwriting, and my name was on the fund's board of directors." Graham put his hands on his knees. He pressed them flat the way a man presses when he is trying to keep himself in the chair because something inside him is pulling him somewhere else. 4 years ago. A port worker named Angela. A funeral he had paid for because it was the right thing to do, and because he had been a longshoreman's son, and because he knew what it meant to lose a parent and have no money for the casket. He had not thought about it again. He had signed the check, asked Caroline to handle the details, and moved on to the next item on his desk. And tonight, Angela's daughter had been standing beside his table at Marchetti's with a bust bin on her hip and 2 inches between his hand and a glass that would have killed him. "The small things," he whispered. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. "Yes," Caroline said. "The small things." He went back the next evening. He went alone. Caroline had offered to come. He said no. This was not a legal visit. This was something else. He knocked on the front door of the house on the north side. The spoon wind chime clinked. The porch light was on. Josie opened the door. She was wearing pajamas with small stars on them, and her hair was out of the braids, a soft, dark cloud around her face. She looked surprised to see him, then not surprised, the way children look when something they expected to happen finally does. "Hi, Mr. Pendleton." "Hi, Josie. Is your grandmother awake?" "She's in the living room. She's been waiting for you." That stopped him. "She's been waiting?" "She saw the news this morning. She told me she figured you'd come." He followed Josie inside. The house was small and very clean. There was a bookshelf in the hallway with more books than the shelf could hold. There were framed pictures on the wall. Josie as a baby, a young woman who must have been Angela, an older photo of a man in work clothes standing on a dock. The living room had a sofa, a recliner, and a lamp with a yellow shade that gave the room the color of warm bread. Mabel Tate was in the recliner. She was a small woman in her 70s, thin in the way that illness makes a person thin, with short silver hair and dark eyes that were so much like Josie's that Graham had to look twice. She was wearing a housecoat and a knitted blanket across her lap. There was a cup of tea on the side table beside her, still steaming, which meant she had made it when she heard the knock. She looked at him the way Elizabeth Coleman had looked at Michael Hartwell, in a story that had not been written yet, but whose shape existed already in the world, the shape of a proud woman measuring a wealthy man, and deciding whether he was worth the trouble of being honest with. "Mr. Pendleton," she said, "sit down. The couch is soft enough if you mind your back." He sat. Josie sat on the floor between them, cross-legged with her chin in her hands, as if she were watching a show she had been waiting to see. "Mrs. Tate." "Mabel, I came to thank you. Your granddaughter saved my life last night. I know. She told me this morning. She also told me she lied about going to her friend's house, which we will be discussing separately." She gave Josie a look. Josie studied the carpet. "But I am not surprised she did what she did. That child has been watching the world with both eyes open since she was old enough to stand. She got that from her mother." "Her mother," Graham said, and the words felt heavy in his mouth. Mabel looked at him for a long moment. Her hand moved on the blanket, smoothing a fold that did not need smoothing. "Mr. Pendleton, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like you to answer it straight." "Yes, ma'am. 4 years ago, when my Angela died, somebody paid for the funeral. Somebody paid for the flowers and the casket and the church and the car to the cemetery. The letter said it was from the Maritime Workers Relief Fund. But there was a note with it, handwritten, that said my daughter mattered and my granddaughter would too. I kept that note. It's in my Bible on the nightstand. I never found out who wrote it, but I spent a year asking around, and the only name that kept coming up next to that fund was yours." Graham did not look away from her. "Was it you?" "Yes, ma'am." She closed her eyes. She did not cry. Mabel Tate was, like Elizabeth Coleman, a woman who had made a decision about crying in front of her grandchild a long time ago. She opened her eyes. "Then I need you to understand what happened last night. My Josie didn't save a stranger. She saved the man who buried her mother. She didn't know it. I didn't tell her. But the world knew it, Mr. Pendleton. Whatever it is that runs beneath the surface of things, whatever you want to call it, God or grace or just the stubborn way that kindness circles back around when you're not looking, it knew. It sent my granddaughter to your table. And it sent her because 4 years ago you did a thing you didn't have to do for a woman you never met, and you did it with no name on it, and that is the kind of thing that comes back. Not always, but when it matters." The living room was very quiet. The lamp with the yellow shade hummed faintly. Josie was looking at her grandmother with an expression that Graham recognized from the courthouse steps in another story, the expression of a child who is hearing something she is going to carry for the rest of her life. "Grandma," Josie said slowly. "He paid for Mama's funeral?" "Yes, baby." Josie looked at Graham. Her brown eyes were enormous and wet and filled with something that was not gratitude, exactly, and not sadness, exactly, but something in between that does not have a name in English or in any other language. Something that lives in the space where a child begins to understand that the world is more connected than she thought, and more broken than she hoped, and more beautiful than either. "Thank you," she said. It was 2 words. It was enough. Graham nodded. He could not speak. He did not try. Mabel let the moment sit. She was a woman who understood the weight of silence and did not rush to fill it. Then she said, "Mr. Pendleton, I imagine you came here with an offer, something about helping us. Something about my treatment or Josie's school or this house that needs a new roof." "I did. Then, going to tell you the same thing I told the last man from the church who came with an offer. I will accept help. I am too old and too sick and too responsible for that child to refuse it on pride. But I have condition. I'm listening. Josie goes to school, same friends, same bus. You don't move her to some private academy where she's the charity case in a room full of children who have never taken a bus in their lives. She stays where she is. If you want to help with the school, you help the whole school, not just her. Done. My treatment. I know what it costs. I've been skipping every other appointment because the copay is more than my Social Security check. If you're going to cover it, you cover it quietly, the same way you covered Angela's funeral. No press, no foundation gala, no photo of me in a hospital bed next to a man in a suit. I am a human being, not a story. Understood. And the last thing, the most important thing. She reached over and put her hand on Josie's head. Josie leaned into it the way a plant leans toward a window. If something happens to me, and we both know something is going to happen to me, Mr. Pendleton, because I have stage 3 ovarian cancer and I am 71 years old and the numbers are what they are. If something happens to me, you make sure that child has a home. Not a group home. Not a foster placement. A home. With a door she can lock and a window she can open and a shelf for her books. And someone who knows her name. Graham looked at Josie. Josie looked at him. The wind chime on the porch played its tuneless song through the screen door. "She'll have a home," he said. "I promise you that. Don't promise me. Promise her." He turned to Josie. "I promise you," he said. Josie nodded once. She did not smile. She was 8 years old and she had already learned that the world is a place where promises are made and sometimes kept, and the keeping is what matters, not the making. But she nodded, and in the nod was something that looked, if you were paying attention, like the beginning of trust. Mabel Tate leaned back in her recliner. She pulled the blanket up to her chin. She looked tired in the way that sick people look tired at the end of a day that asked more of them than they had, but she also looked in the yellow light of the lamp like a woman who had set her house in order. "Now," she said. "Have you eaten today, Mr. Pendleton? You look like a man who has forgotten about food. I have not eaten today. Josie, go heat up the soup. There's enough for 3. Use the good bowls." Josie stood up, brushed off her star pajamas, and walked to the kitchen. Graham heard a cabinet open, heard the clink of bowls, heard the small domestic sounds of a life continuing. Mabel watched him from across the room. "You know," she said, "Angela used to say something. She used to say that the world doesn't give you what you deserve. It gives you what somebody else decided to leave behind for you. A coat on a bench, a check with no name, a child with open eyes." She closed her eyes, then, just for a second, and when she opened them, she was looking at the framed photograph on the wall, the young woman with Josie's face who had died at 26 and whose funeral had been paid for by a man who had not known her name. "She left me Josie," Mabel said softly, "and Josie left you your life. I think we're even now, Mr. Pendleton. I think we're even." From the kitchen, the sound of soup warming on the stove. From the porch, the sound of spoons in the wind. From the living room, the sound of 2 people sitting in silence with a debt between them that neither owed and both understood, and a child in the next room who had seen what the rest of the world had walked past, and had spoken up, and had changed everything the way the small things do. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Subscribe to Pure Silent Stories for more stories about the quiet acts of courage that change everything, and the unlikely heroes who see what the rest of us miss.